For this year's Pride Month, I wanted to dig a little into the past and see if there were any comics written about the LGBTQ plus community in less tolerant times. Not that times are that tolerant now, but anyway, I came across this miniseries published by Milestone Media called Death Wish, which was about an anti-hero called, Death Wish. This series was written by Maddie Blaustein, penciled by J.H. Williams III in his first ever official comic work, and inked by Jimmy Palmiotti. While the latter two are well known to the point people can recognize them from some of their more prominent work, Maddie Blaustein is perhaps not as famous in the comic world, but we'll talk about her in more detail later in the video. As for the titular Death Wish, he made his debut in the pages of Hardware as a gun-toting anti-hero who watched his family die. That would make him like Frank Castle, except his family was killed in a manner too gruesome to describe in a YouTube video hoping to remain monetized. And then he is also subjected to the same fate as his family, but he survives and now targets criminals committing similar crimes. I wish I could go into a bit more detail, but frankly, even putting the need to censor for YouTube aside, his backstory is depicted in a frankly tasteless manner. Now, the book he's in, Hardware, isn't an easy read because of its dark subject matter, but I do have to wonder if they went a bit too far with Death Wish. So, the next question is, how does a character like Death Wish get his own miniseries, let alone the first ever miniseries for Milestone? Despite having so few appearances at the time, I can count them on one hand. Well, that's because on reading the miniseries, it's clear that his name might be on the title, but the story being told isn't his. Now, that type of storytelling is usually frowned upon as it is considered misleading the audience by telling them that they're going to get a story about one character and then sidetrack them with a completely different character. However, I'm actually okay with it after reading Death Wish for a few reasons. For starters, while I have no way of saying how Death Wish fans, if there were any, felt when this was coming out, at this moment, the character has been reduced to a footnote in Milestone's history, let alone comic history. So I don't have any strong feelings about the story actually not being about him. Secondly, after reading the story with the added knowledge of the writer's history, I wouldn't be surprised if she had a hand in getting this greenlit because she wanted to tell a story, a personal one. Speaking of the story, before getting to the plot, I need to address one final elephant in the room. This series has been out of print for some time and does not look to be collected anytime soon, which I feel is a damn shame after having read it, but for those interested, let's just say there are plenty of places to read comics online, and finally talk about the plot of Death Wish. Death Wish opens with a cop called Martin Ram hunting down a serial killer who targets trans sex workers going by Boots. While pursuing the criminal, he has a chance encounter with Death Wish, who tells Ram that while he hasn't faced it yet, he's also one of the girls. 4 years later, Marissa Ram is the first pre-op trans police officer on the Dakota Police Force. While she faces discrimination amongst her peers, she has made a life for herself with Deanie, one of the survivors of Boots' attempted murders. Unfortunately, Boots has re-emerged recently and Ram wants to be the one to take the bastard down. With Death Wish running around as a wild card, will Marissa be able to bring Boots to justice? That's as much plot I'm okay going into because I feel this story is best experienced through reading it. It is one of the most emotional stories about struggling with one's identity and the attempts to break free from the role society has assigned to you from birth. Maddie Blaustein channels her own experiences as a trans woman into her work, and it shows. However, there is a second writer on the story as well, someone credited as a plot assistant, Yves Fizani. Yves channels her thoughts onto the character of Deanie the same way Maddie did for Marissa, as Yves had faced similar experiences in her life. So her partner, Maddie, decided that she should have the chance to say her piece as well in the last issue of the comic. Now, there are a few things I could nitpick about this series, like the fact that Deathwish really doesn't add much to the story and honestly confuses more with his presence at times, or how the comic uses a certain phrase used to describe trans people that is widely recognized as a slur in modern times. But truthfully, none of those things matter compared to what this comic is. Two trans women telling their story in a mainstream comic in 1994. They don't hide it, they don't dance around the themes and the serious topics, instead addressing them head on. Most importantly, they serve as an inspiration according to the letters columns for these comics. And shout out to Milestone Media, one of the more progressive comic publishers of the time, for not stepping on their toes and publishing the comic, despite the fact that I'm sure they received far more hate mail than they did positive ones for this comic. Finally, a bit more about Maddie Blaustein as promised. While comic fans may not immediately recognize her name, her voice is well known to a different set of fans, those of the Pokemon anime.
Looks like this part of town's fallen on hard times, but times were always hard here.
Yes, Maddie Blaustein was the voice of Meowth in the 4Kids dub of the anime. And while she was still going with her dead name Adam at the time of writing Deathwish, after the episode Go West Young Meowth, a story in which Meowth fundamentally changes who he is but still finds acceptance with Jesse and James of Team Rocket, she was inspired to transition. I learned a lot of this from the former PokeTuber or anime reviewer Suede, who is still on Patreon and deserving of your support, and I've linked his review of the episode for you to check out in the description. Sadly, Maddie Blaustein is no longer with us, having passed away in 2008. This one was for you, Maddie. So, Deathwish took the story of a man who was violated and turned to darkness, and instead focused on two women rejecting the world's view of them and trying to make their own way in the world. Yeah, I think there's something beautiful in that. Happy Pride Month 2025, everyone.